Your savings account lost 23% of its value in the last 4 years. Not because of fees, not because of bad investing, by design. While you were working, saving, and doing everything right, the system was quietly transferring your purchasing power to people who understood one thing you don't: where money actually comes from. In 2020 alone, the US government created $3.2 trillion out of nothing, with keystrokes on a computer. If you or I did this, it would be called counterfeiting, and we'd go to federal prison. When they do it, it's called monetary policy. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how money gets created, who benefits when it does, and why understanding this one question separates the people getting richer every year from the people getting quietly poorer. By the end, you'll never look at a dollar the same way again. You were taught money comes from the government. The treasury prints it. The mint stamps the coins. Simple. This is wrong, almost entirely wrong. Less than 3% of all money in the US economy exists as physical cash. The other 97% exists only as numbers on bank computers, digital entries, bits in a database. So if the government isn't creating 97% of the money supply, who is? Banks, commercial banks, the same Chase, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America branches you walk past every day. They create money out of thin air every time they make a loan, not by lending out other people's deposits like your high school economics teacher told you, by literally typing new money into existence. When you take out a $300,000 mortgage, the bank doesn't pull $300,000 from a vault. It doesn't pull it from another customer's account. It types $300,000 into your account. The money didn't exist 5 seconds before. Now it does. This is the most important fact about modern money that 95% of adults don't know, and once you understand it, the entire economy starts to make sense for the first time in your life. But to understand why banks have this power, we have to look at what money actually is, because it isn't what you think. Forget everything you think money is. Strip it down. Money is not gold. Money is not paper. Money is not numbers on a screen. Those are just the form money takes. The thing itself is something else. Money is an agreement, a shared belief, a social technology for tracking who owes what to whom. Think about it. The dollar in your pocket has no inherent value. You can't eat it. You can't burn it for warmth. Well, you can, but it's a bad heater. It's just a piece of cotton paper. The reason it has value is because everyone around you has agreed it has value. The moment that agreement breaks, the paper is worthless. This sounds abstract until you remember it has happened. In 1923 Germany, people burned cash for heat because firewood cost more than the currency. The agreement broke, the paper became paper again. Every form of money in history, shells, gold, silver, paper, digital, has been a way of solving the same problem. How do we track value across time and trade? The form doesn't matter, the trust does. And the question of who controls that trust changed forever on a single day in 1971. And almost nobody alive today understands what happened. For most of human history, money was tied to something physical: gold, silver, land. The government couldn't just create more of it because they didn't have more gold to back it. The US was on a gold standard. Every dollar represented a fixed amount of real gold sitting in vaults. If you had $35, you could legally walk into a bank and demand 1 ounce of gold. The dollar was a receipt for real, physical, finite gold. This kept the government honest. They couldn't print more money than they had gold to back. The money supply was anchored to reality. Then on August 15, 1971, President Nixon went on TV and ended it. Just like that, the US would no longer convert dollars to gold. The dollar was now backed by nothing. Just the government's promise. Just the belief that it had value. This is called fiat currency, from the Latin, let it be done. Money exists because the government says it does, period. Every major currency in the world followed within a decade. By 1980, no major currency on Earth was backed by anything physical. We had entered a new monetary era, the first in 5,000 years of human history. The result, between 1971 and today, the US dollar has lost 87% of its purchasing power. A 1971 dollar is worth about 13 cents today. The same house that cost $25,000 in 1971 now costs $400,000, not because the house got better, but because the dollar got weaker. But here's where it gets really interesting. If the dollar lost 87% of its value, where did all that value go? Because value doesn't just disappear. Here's the part nobody explains. When new money gets created, it doesn't appear in everyone's bank account equally. It enters the economy at specific points, through specific people. First, by the time it reaches you and me, prices have already adjusted upward to account for the new money supply. This is called the Cantillon effect, named after an 18th century economist who figured it out 300 years ago. And it explains why the rich get richer faster than everyone else, regardless of how hard anyone works. Here's how it works. When the Fed creates new money, it goes to banks first. Banks lend it to corporations and wealthy clients first. Corporations use it to buy back their own stock, pumping stock prices. Wealthy clients use it to buy more real estate and assets. By the time that new money trickles down to wages for regular workers, 6 to 18 months later, the prices of stocks, homes, and assets have already jumped 20%, 30%, sometimes 50%. The asset owners get richer because they were closer to the money spigot. The wage earners get poorer because they were further from it. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is just how the system works. In 2020, the Fed created $3.2 trillion. The stock market jumped 65% in 18 months. Real estate jumped 40%. Bitcoin jumped 600%. Anyone who owned assets got dramatically wealthier. Anyone whose only asset was their paycheck got 18% poorer because of inflation. Same year, same country, two completely different economies depending on which side of the money creation you were on. We're halfway through. The next part shows you exactly how to get on the right side of this, but first, you need to meet the institution that controls the entire game. The Federal Reserve is the most powerful institution in the world, more powerful than Congress, more powerful than the president, more powerful than any military on earth. And it's not actually part of the U.S. government. The Fed was created in 1913 in a secret meeting on Jekyll Island, Georgia. A group of bankers and one senator drafted the original framework over 10 days. They explicitly designed it to look like a government agency while functioning as a private banking cartel. Today, the Federal Reserve is a hybrid, public board, private member banks. Its decisions are made by 12 governors who are appointed but cannot be fired by elected officials. They were designed to be insulated from democratic accountability. That's not a bug, that's a feature of the original design. The Fed has three superpowers nobody else has. First, it sets interest rates. When it lowers rates, borrowing becomes cheap, asset prices boom, the economy heats up. When it raises rates, borrowing becomes expensive, asset prices crash, unemployment rises. With a single announcement, the Fed can make trillions of dollars appear or disappear from the stock market. Second, it creates money directly. The Fed can buy government bonds with money that didn't exist before. In 2008, the Fed created $3.5 trillion this way. In 2020, another $4.5 trillion. Just typed it into existence and used it to buy financial assets. Third, it regulates the banks that create the other 97% of the money supply, which means even the bank money creation we talked about earlier is downstream from Fed policy. The Fed isn't just part of the economy, the Fed is the economy. And once you see this, you can't unsee it. Now let me show you what this means for your actual money. You were taught that saving money is responsible, smart, the foundation of financial security. In a fiat currency system with constant money printing, this is wrong. Saving cash is one of the worst financial decisions you can make, and most Americans don't realize it. Here's the math. The Fed targets 2% inflation per year. That's their stated goal. In reality, inflation runs closer to 3 to 4% on average and spikes higher in crisis years like the one we just lived through. Your savings account pays maybe 0.5% in a normal year, maybe 4% in a high-rate year. After taxes, you're netting half of that. This means every dollar sitting in your savings account loses 2 to 3% of its real value every single year, guaranteed, by design. This means every dollar sitting in your savings account loses 2 to 3% of its real value every single year, guaranteed, by design. $100,000 in savings today is worth about $74,000 in real purchasing power 10 years from now. You didn't lose money on paper, the number still says $100,000. You lost money in reality. What that $100,000 can buy has shrunk. This is what economists mean when they say inflation is a hidden tax. The government doesn't have to vote to take your money, they just create new money. Your existing money becomes worth less, and the difference effectively transfers to whoever got the new money first. You worked for those dollars, then the system slowly drains the value out of them while you sleep. The people who understand this stop holding cash beyond what they need for immediate expenses and an emergency fund. They convert dollars into assets that move with inflation: real estate, stocks, businesses, gold, sometimes Bitcoin. They become asset owners instead of cash holders. This isn't about being greedy or chasing returns. It's about not being the person at the wrong end of a system designed to transfer wealth from cash holders to asset owners. But you can't just buy any asset and call it protection. Some assets are real shelter, some are traps in disguise. The difference comes down to one principle that's been true for 5,000 years. Imagine you're standing in ancient Rome in 50 BC. A silver denarius coin in your pocket is 95% pure silver. You can use it to buy bread, hire a soldier, or bury it in the ground for your grandchildren. Now jump forward 300 years to 250 AD. The same coin, same face stamped on it, is now 5% silver and 95% copper. Emperors had quietly melted down the old coins and reissued them with less silver, keeping the difference. Your grandfather's denarius was worth 20 times what your denarius is worth. Your grandfather's denarius was worth 20 times what your denarius is worth. This is the oldest pattern in monetary history, and it has a name. This. Hard money is anything difficult to produce more of. Gold, silver, land, Bitcoin. These things have a fixed or slowly growing supply. You can't just create more by decree. Soft money is anything easy to produce more of. Dollars, euros, yen, any government currency, created in unlimited quantities by central banks with no physical constraint. In 5,000 years of monetary history, hard money has always defeated soft money over the long term. Every empire that debased its currency eventually collapsed. Every empire. Rome diluted its silver until the empire fell. The Weimar Republic printed marks until a loaf of bread cost 200 billion of them. Zimbabwe issued $100 trillion notes. Venezuela's currency lost 99.99% of its value in a decade. The pattern is always the same. Governments overspend, they print to cover the gap. The currency weakens, citizens lose faith, the system collapses, a new hard money standard emerges. Cycle repeats. We are currently in the longest pure fiat experiment in human history, 54 years since 1971. No major currency has ever survived being unbacked for longer than about 40 years before either collapsing or being reformed. This doesn't mean the dollar will collapse next year. It might not collapse for decades, but it does mean holding 100% of your wealth in soft money is a historically unprecedented bet against 5,000 years of pattern. The smart move isn't to panic, it's to diversify. Hold some soft money for daily life. Hold hard assets for long-term wealth preservation. Let the system do its thing while you stay protected. Now let me show you the specific mechanic that makes this entire system run, because this is where it gets weird. Banks don't just create money when they make loans. They create money on top of money in a process called fractional reserve banking. This is how $1 of original deposits turns into $10 of total money in the economy. Here's how it works. You deposit $1,000 in Chase. Chase is required to keep a small fraction on reserve, currently 0% by the way, since the Fed eliminated reserve requirements in 2020. Chase can now lend out essentially all of your $1,000. Chase lends $1,000 to someone buying a car. That person hands the $1,000 to the dealership. The dealership deposits it at Wells Fargo. Now, Wells Fargo has $1,000 in deposits and can lend it out. They lend $1,000 to someone for a home renovation. That person pays a contractor. The contractor deposits the $1,000 at Bank of America. Bank of America lends it out again. The same $1,000 of original cash now appears in 3 different bank accounts as deposits and has been lent out 3 times. The money supply has effectively multiplied. The original $1,000 created $4,000 of total money in the system. In practice, this multiplier is around 10x. Every $1 of base money creates roughly $10 of total money supply through the lending process. This is why the financial system is so fragile. If everyone tried to withdraw their deposits at once, a bank run, there isn't enough actual money to give them. The deposits exist on paper. The cash doesn't exist in vaults. The system only works because most people don't withdraw most of their money at most times. When confidence breaks, like 2008, like Silicon Valley Bank in 2023, the whole thing can unravel in days. You don't need to be scared of this, you just need to understand it. Because once you do, the final piece of the puzzle clicks into place. You just want to talk touch with the support her text measures without her reset measures. Let's put it all together. Here's what you actually need to do with this information. Here's what you actually need to do with this information. First, stop thinking of money as a stable store of value. It isn't. The dollar is a melting ice cube, useful in your hand, worthless if you try to keep it. Use dollars for transactions, not for storing wealth. Second, become an asset owner as fast as possible. Stocks, real estate, businesses, and select hard assets. Every paycheck you don't convert into appreciating assets is a paycheck losing value to inflation. Every paycheck you don't convert into appreciating assets is a paycheck losing value to inflation. Now, in the 2020s, it's tracked. Third, understand that debt at fixed rates is actually a tool, not a trap. When you borrow $400,000 at 4% to buy a house, you're betting the dollar will be worth less when you pay it back than it was when you borrowed it. That's historically been a winning bet. Inflation pays down your mortgage in real terms while the asset appreciates. Fourth, watch what the Fed does, not what they say. When they cut rates and create money, asset prices boom. When they raise rates and shrink money supply, asset prices crash. The biggest financial moves of your life should be timed around these cycles, not against them. Fifth, hold a small percentage in true hard assets as insurance. Gold has worked for 5,000 years. Bitcoin is the first new monetary technology in 50 years. Holding 5 to 10% of your net worth in scarce, government-resistant assets is not paranoid, it's prudent. You don't need to escape the system, you just need to position yourself on the right side of it. The single biggest difference between people who get wealthier every year and people who get quietly poorer isn't intelligence, it isn't income, it isn't even discipline. It's understanding how money actually works. The wealthy don't save dollars, they own assets. They use debt strategically. They watch the Fed. They convert paychecks into ownership. They understand that in a fiat system, holding cash is choosing to lose. You now understand more about money than 95% of the adults in this country. The question is whether you'll act on it. This week, do one thing. Look at your total cash savings. Decide how much you actually need for emergencies, usually 3 to 6 months of expenses. Anything above that, start converting into assets. Index funds, real estate, a business, something that grows with inflation instead of dying to it. The system isn't going to change. The Fed isn't going to stop creating money. The dollar isn't going back on gold. The only variable is whether you understand the game and play it, or stay confused and lose to it. Comment below with the one thing in this video that surprised you most, and ask yourself, now that you know where money actually comes from, what are you going to do differently?